Good morning. Welcome. My name is Kevin Kirkpatrick. I'm the founder of Avery Professional Group. I specialize in helping healthcare organizations recruit top clinical talent, and it's kind of one of the most competitive markets that we've seen. Today's topic is about branding. And when we talk about branding, there's really kind of two aspects. There's the corporate branding, which you probably work with communications or marketing and stuff like that to do your corporate branding. But what I want to talk about is personal branding, right? And with the rise of social media and the podcasts and all of these other things, it's the best time ever to be developing your own brand at the same time as aligning it with your corporate branding and focusing on things like transparency, communication, and person. So let's jump in. So right now, we're facing an uphill battle. About 71% of healthcare employers are stipulating that it's hard to find clinical talent. But here's really what's happening is we're sending out job ads and messages that don't necessarily resonate. Candidates don't trust generic outreach, right? And if you've tried automation, through LinkedIn and stuff like that, you've probably found that you can email 100 or LinkedIn message 100 people and the response is very low. A lot of that, I think, comes down to generic outreach or outreach that's not landing, right? So what's happening is, according to Gallup, only 23% of workers trust recruiters to ask in their best interest. Now, this is probably, I couldn't find the numbers for Canadian, so this is predominantly US, but I'd gather the sentiment is the same. So what that does is that creates an opportunity for those that really want to look at developing their own brand and focusing on transparency, ethics, and responsibility to our candidates as well as our clients. So every interaction that we have with a candidate, every email, every LinkedIn message, every text message, if you text message, we have an opportunity to build a relationship, right? And hiring healthcare practitioners and clinicians doesn't take 2 weeks. It often takes considerably longer. I just placed a physician in PEI that took 23 months, right? So the individual was coming from the UK. So there was immigration, there was licensing, family travel and stuff like that made it. So in order to encourage people to participate in a longer process, we really need to engage with them and ensure that they trust us and are interested in what we have to say and what the organization has to say and what that will look like for them, right? So one of the things that I was thinking of is, if we get a candidate that says, we're hiring, are you interested? Versus a message that says, Dr. Smith, I've read about your work in palliative care and believe your philosophy aligns with our organization's mission and vision for end-of-life care. One is obviously much more engaged and thorough than the other, and will have a better outreach, right? So, excuse me. Some of the things that we want to look at is creating pillars. And when someone Googles your organization or lands on the LinkedIn page, what do they learn, right? Is your mission clear? Can they see real clinicians speaking about what it's like to work there? 86% of job seekers will look at your reviews and look at your online presence before they choose to apply. Make it easy for them to say yes. Post physician testimonials, highlight mentorship programs, explain the clinical model, right? So community I worked with had a unique palliative care model that enabled further involvement from family physicians and reduced the reliance on palliative care physicians. So, this was a pillar of excellence and stuff like that, and innovative. And the more people that learn about that model, the more that will engage with them and be interested in going to participate there, locum there, or even learn from it, right? So, a lot of it is like looking at why someone would leave, right? If I'm a nurse somewhere or a physician somewhere, what is the hook to get me to leave and go to a different organization, right? So some of the things that we've highlighted and I've I've seen in the last year are mission driven. Is your organization's mission and vision, does it align with candidates, right? Is there something that they're missing that they can get by coming to work for you? And that is investigated and researched by having conversations. It's not necessarily being researched just in a job ad, right? Can they understand what the compensation structure is going to be like, right? If you understand what the compensation structure is, you can envision yourself in that role, because every clinician has financial responsibilities, family responsibilities, and things of that nature, right? And it's usually about mission and vision first, and then compensation later, right? So I've often found that as long as the compensation is competitive or a bit more or comparable, and the other aspects are there, whether it be relocating for family, relocating for their spouses, job opportunities, or we're seeing a lot of American trained physicians come back to Canada because they're from Canada. So that's a lifestyle change. It's often in spite of the monetary challenges and differences, right? So other things are, how well do you take care of your staff? So safety, respect, flexibility, right? I have some clients that offer a hybrid model where you can see patients virtually and in person, and those are much easier to hire for than full time, right? Or often people want to work travel nursing because it allows them flexibility in their schedule, and in a lot of cases more money as well, that they can't get working directly for a hospital, right? So understanding why and aligning yourself with that, with that, right? And some organizations also profile their hires and profile their people online, so people can hear from them directly. They talk about the building credibility, they talk about their ethics, they talk about their clinical vision and clinical services and stuff like that, right? So one of the kind of the heart of today's conversation is really looking at trust, transparency, and candidate communication, right? So we start with trust. And the challenge is that, we are meeting people for the first time. So it's really earned through follow-up and transparency and setting expectations, right? Like often when someone's interested in a job, we're never going to be fast enough for them, right? Or when a hiring manager wants somebody to start today because they have a hole in their schedule, we're never going to be fast enough, right? We have occupational health checks, we've got licensing, invested research, we've got all of these aspects that slow down the process. So knowing that we need to do these things and we can't avoid them, how we communicate through that process is paramount, right? And it could be as simple as a weekly email, or a text message, if that's how you're communicating with them, that says, hey, I've spoken with the hiring manager, these are the questions that we have, or we're waiting on feedback, right? And it's just really, if you say you're going to call on Friday, right? We have Outlook calendars and reminders, and there's usually reminders in our ATSs, so it's really leveraging them as well. Be honest about compensation and work-life balance. Talk about as many things early on in the process so that you're not spending a week talking to someone only to find out they're not in the compensation, right? Or, let's take a physician example, right? Is, tell somebody that they can make $500,000 a year, but then they realize they need to have 2,200 patients on their roster, right? Whereas, those things need to be communicated early on, and they need to be transparent, and they need to not change through the process. There may be negotiation with things later on, but that's usually a discussion after you've built a relationship with them, and more of a one-on-one thing, usually over the phone or in person, right? Do not ghost candidates, right? And, do not delay updates. Don't sugarcoat the culture, right? Because the last thing you want is organization and then leave shortly thereafter, because that creates a bad impact in the market, because people know. Every physician I know knows the year ahead of them in residency and the year behind them. So there is a lot of communication and networking and stuff that happens. Probably 80% of my hires are referrals, where one physician told me about another physician. So I think that's key, and that's built on your relationship, right? Like I block time in my calendar, 3 1-hour blocks a week, and those are strictly just for candidate and client communication, just so that it's a block time that I can go through my ATS and respond to all my clients or candidates, right? And I always talk to them where they are, and I found that text messaging is probably one of the easier ways for quick updates. I don't use it to have a in-depth conversation. I usually do it for 2-line updates. Or to schedule an actual time to speak based on their schedule. And I work a lot with physicians, and getting them during the day is not easy. So, you can text during the day, they'll look at their phone, probably respond, and then, you can schedule the time, right? So, and just be who you are. That's the other thing, right? Like, I have a podcast. It's not the most polished podcast going, but I'm not the most polished guy either. So it's really about being who you are, caring about the work you're doing, and investing in communicating as much as you can, right? So according to a 2023 Doximity survey, trust is actually the number one factor in career making decisions for physicians, right? So allowing or encouraging them to talk to their medical director, their chief of their program, and aligning those conversations and managing and fostering those relationships goes a long way, right? And a lot of marketing people I've talked to and heard is candidates and customers and whoever you want to engage with, they will remember how you make them feel more than how much money they're going to make, right? Like it's by the time the money rolls in, they've already been through the process for weeks or months. So you've really got to be focusing on that. And the thing I'm going to address now is that I've worked for several downtown hospitals, and you get a lot of candidates, right? So what I've told people to do is, in instances where you get too many candidates, you have to find the best ways to screen the ones that are in your short list and quickly communicate to those that are not in the short list that they unfortunately haven't been selected, and share a little bit of information that's that just says, like, we've had a lot of applicants, and at this point we've narrowed it down to a smaller group that unfortunately you weren't included in, right? Or whatever the corporate speak is. I deal more with one-on-one than large groups of applicants, but I've heard stories of people getting a rejection email from the ATS a year after they've applied, right? So you want to avoid that, because that obviously looks very tacky. Share kind of issues and challenges, right? Like, often what I have to talk to physicians about is licensing and immigration, right? And how we're going to get through that process, or if we can. One of the things that I find I run into a lot is, international medical graduates that, are probably quite super skilled and very good at what they do, but, because of either where they trained or which exams they haven't or haven't done, they might not be eligible for licensure, right? So you try and give them resources to see what their options are. I've introduced people to the practice ready assessment or the different programs and stuff like that to try and send them in the right direction. Because I have an adage that, if someone goes to the front door and the door's locked, they don't know where else to go, right? But if they come to your front door and you tell them it's not the right place, but the right place is 2 doors over, then you've given them hope, and you've given them somewhere to move on to. Share the process, right? So 78% of job seekers say the overall candidate experience is really indicative of how they will treat you once you're staff. And that's based on a Career Builder survey. So probably right across multiple multiple disciplines and not just healthcare. Share the call schedule, share what they can expect with respect to clinical autonomy, onboarding, and mentorship. We have a lot of new clinicians coming from abroad that are going to be new to the Canadian system, whether it's a new nurse that's an IEN nurse or like that. I think we as organizations need to focus on onboarding and mentorship, and using different tools to ensure that they get the ability to be successful, right? Because their success is the organization's success, and their success is increasing retention and stuff like that, right? So let's talk a bit about kind of tactical things and stuff like that, right? So what I would say is, audit your candidate journey, right? Like, go through what it would be like to apply, right? Or you can, choose an applicant and follow them through the process, and see what it looks like. And I used to do a 30-day survey once somebody was hired, and after 30 days, I would ask them about the process. And that was usually key on identifying if there were gaps, or if there was things that we weren't communicating, or if expectations weren't being set. And I just used MailChimp. It wasn't some crazy phone call thing or anything like that. It was really just, email them and ask those types of questions, right? We have to put certain messaging through our system to deal with volumes and stuff like that. Does it convey the right tone? Is our messaging responsive? Is our messaging coming off as human, right? Like, we all see these out of office or other types of messages that seem very robotic, right? So, that frustrates candidates and makes them have a challenge with respect to, feeling like they're connected to you, right? It's like, having them understand you, feel your organization's culture and stuff like that through the process goes a long way to engaging with them, right? Create recruiter messaging templates that reflect your values. So, when someone applies, often we send an automated message saying, thank you, we've got your resume. Can we use that as an opportunity to share some information with them, send them to a site that gives them more information about the organization, right? Like, just giving tidbits, right? Can we use personalized subject lines and referencing, mutual goals? Like, hey, we're looking to help you consider leadership roles with us here, and talk about the human aspect. Like, you believe in mental health. We appreciate that, and we too believe in mental health, and as such, we're interested to continue to talk, right? Using internal stories in your public content is a huge scenario. So one of the hospitals I worked at, we did little videos, cartoon videos of staff, and it was probably one of the most popular marketing and recruiting advertisements that we did, because they could see themselves in the role, right? They could see what it was like to be there, and they could see themselves in it, right? And it's really quite different, right? So other things is, just involve your leadership, right? Like, they know the culture in their area. They know the culture as well. So, ask them why someone would be interested in that type of role, right? And ask them what it would look like for someone in that role, and then share that and include that in your messaging and include that in your initial screenings with your candidates and stuff like that, right? Gather stories, right? And the cool thing is, if you learn about the organization, you can better screen candidates, you can better engage with candidates. So, spend time learning about the organization. And, I used to make the recruiters that work for me do a monthly meeting with all of the hiring managers, but in the units, right? So instead of it being, in HR, it was, go to the ICU, meet with the managers in their office, be seen, build your brand within the organization, right? And then other things are, gather stories, like I said, and use that in your messaging and stuff like that, and then use that when you talk to candidates. It humanizes things. The other thing is, align internally, right? Look at, how does your communications or marketing group interact with HR? How do you align with the leadership group, that's their mission, vision, and values, and things like that, right? So I think it's really understanding what the what the organization looks like and what it really entails, and sharing what you can, right? Obviously, we have to be mindful of never sharing patient information, but we can build stories, right? And a lot of the successful hospitals, clinics, and stuff like that do share stories that engage with their audience, right? So part of what I wanted to finish on, and my last little section, is if I'm a recruiter, how do I build my brand, right? And I think it comes down to a lot of the things that we've mentioned, but it comes down to being visible, being approachable, and adding value. And I'll repeat that one: adding value. So I'll tell you a bit of a unique story that I didn't see coming. So I was on Reddit looking for memes to send my wife. All right, my wife had a rough day, so I thought, I'm gonna spam her with silly memes of ridiculous things. And what I did was I actually found a medicine group on Reddit. So I thought, okay, I'll go out of curiosity and look through it. And then a lot of it was, there was a thread about physicians looking to come to Canada from the US, but not understanding how, right? So, I answered a few questions, traded some emails, and had people reach out to me, right? So I just said in my messages, I answered questions and gave them resources. And next thing I know, I'm getting emails because I shared my email address if anybody had additional comments or questions. And next thing I know, I'm getting candidates that are mostly Canadians that have trained in the US that want to come home, right? So last year I placed 6 physicians. Well, in the last 12 months, I've placed 12 physicians that came from the US. They were Canadians that trained in the US that wanted to come home, right? So, these are, physicians that came because, they, not because of the compensation, but because of the vision. And they connected with me as opposed to one of my numerous competitors because I was perceived as an expert, right? So, much like the reason I'm doing today's webinar is to share my experience, share my knowledge, and allow people to see who I am and allow people to see my experience, so that if they have questions, they'll engage with me, right? So, I'll continue to put out job ads. I'll continue to do social media posts, but the reality is being perceived as an expert and adding value is the number one reason to get clients, get candidates, and to do that. And I think if you partner well with your internal corporate communications team, then what ends up happening is your brand can be yourself and leverage the corporate brand, right? So, I work at XYZ hospital that is the number one cardiac care hospital. And, if you're a new grad interested in cardiology, then these are the 3 courses you need to take. If you'd like more information, please reach out to me, right? So it's really just add value, be an expert, and don't feel like you have to hide behind the corporate brand. I encourage people to share information on their corporate LinkedIn, but also on their personal LinkedIn, because people are more inclined to reach out to somebody they feel comfortable with than they are some random brand, right? So I use my podcast to interview and highlight physician leaders, and often we partner with the hospital they work at, and the goal is to elevate that individual's brand and that individual's reputation at the same time as the organization's, right? Because if I go and see an organization that has an amazing person that is doing great things, my first reaction is, I wonder if they need someone like me there, right? So people hire people, physicians hire physicians, nurses hire nurses. So profiling and being a person and being transparent, and then obviously communicating when you say you will, communicating transparently. ChatGPT is great. I use it every day, but I don't know if I would have it do all of my messaging. I use it often just to understand statistics to determine what the content of my message is going to be, but then I type my message to people and learn where they are. Facebook is big still for clinicians. I still recruit a lot of physicians off several Facebook groups. I have a Facebook group that I administer that is intended to share information and stuff like that. But it's really about, how do you be an expert, and how do you elevate your conversations with people to make them more impactful, because then people will be attracted to come to your organization because they want to talk to you. So if you want to talk about this one-on-one or advice or anything that you feel I skipped over, feel free to email me. It's kevin@averyprofessionalgroup.com. Again, it's kevin@averyprofessionalgroup.com. I have worked with numerous hospitals in Canada and the US around recruitment processes and recruiting for them as well. I'm always happy to share information, but I think, spend the time to determine who you are, what your brand is going to look like, and who you are as an individual, and then brand yourself as well as branding the organization you work with, right? Like, I wouldn't brand Kevin Kirkpatrick and exclude Avery Professional Group. So I find the happy medium between the two, right? And when I worked at Humber River Hospital, I was Kevin at Humber, right? And you want to brand Kevin at Humber or Kevin at Adventist Health. Like, it's just, you need to find that happy medium and be yourself, be comfortable, be honest. It is so much easier to not be, to not have conflict if you're just being yourself, and polite, obviously. So either way, have a great Tuesday. You can always reach me online on LinkedIn. This will be on YouTube as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Take care and have a great day, everyone.